Hi Corey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm so excited to be here, Maureen. I'm doing
Yeah.
so awesome right now.
Welcome to the Intuitive Style Podcast.
Thank you. I'm very honored.
Right. Just before we super dive in, would you just share your first, last name, and your pronouns, please?
Sure. My name is Kori Kovacs and I go by she, her. Thank you.
Awesome. So, as a life and wellness coach, you specialize in inspiring others to embrace unique strengths, essentially matching our outsides to our insides. I love this concept. Can you share a little bit of a glimpse into your approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I came up with this phrase about, bringing your insides outsides or bringing this like matching component of what you feel, who you are on the inside, who you are at a soul level, and really getting the opportunity to share that out in the world. I feel like I came across this concept. I'm not really sure where, but I developed it kind of became a mantra for me when I realized that I have this beautiful being inside of me that is just wanting to come out. I had really gone through a really challenging time in my life and I felt like I was kind of hiding myself. And when I started reconnecting with this person that I am, this person who has grown through resiliency, through things that have been challenging, then suddenly I realized, wow, she's a really cool person. I want to bring her out into the world. And so I started matching my outsides to the person that I was feeling and getting to know on the inside. And when that happened, I just feel like it was like coming out of a cage. Suddenly my wings just like burst out and I was able to really show up in the world as the person that I believe that I am.
That's incredible. And you talk about this idea of you'd been through these difficult situations, and it almost sounds to me like that inner confidence came first, and then the outside happened second. Do
Mm,
you have a perspective on, which if you can fake it till you make it, or does the inner confidence come first? Does it kind of depend?
mm.
Or at least
That's
just speak from your perspective.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question because I think we live in a day and age where they talk about, faking it till you making it or putting this front on the outside, but really not feeling confident on the inside. I know I share that story a lot with my audience is that I believe that confidence comes from your self-trust within yourself. It's not something that you can just snap and say, oh, I feel confident today. I'm going to go out and do this thing. I think that feels really forced.
Mm,
And so to me, it's about building trust with yourself, getting to know who you are, and then expressing and taking action from that step that truly brings the confidence out in you.
yeah.
Because you can feel confident maybe in some things, but not in other areas. And I truly believe that, if you look up confidence in the etymology, I'm a huge etymology nerd. So if you look at confidence, what that means, it really means a reliance or deep trust in something or someone. And when we talk about
Mm,
confidence, about you having a deep trust and reliance in yourself to be able to go out and be this person that you know that you can be. So when you start building that self trust, then that's really where the confidence
yeah.
starts to grow.
How have you built self-trust personally?
Ooh, that's such a great question. I a lot of it had to come from a place of compassion first.
Oh,
I had, yes, yeah, like this compassion
yeah.
part of being a human. And, I had gone through a really hard time in my life. I became a single mom and
Mm,
my career took a shift. I, was going to school to become a nurse during the pandemic and things just really fell apart, in my life trajectory as I was approaching 40. And I felt a lot of shame and a lot of guilt about the
mm.
direction and where I was going. And in addition to that, I had gained like 70 pounds. And so there was all these things that had happened, and I really lost my confidence and my faith in myself to be able to go out into the world and show the world who I was. So I feel like the moment that I decided to offer compassion for this
Mhm.
place in the survival mode that I had been in and what had happened to me in my life, suddenly it opened up space for me to actually get to know who I
Mm.
was. And when that happened, I started taking steps by journaling and meditating and moving my body in a way that felt genuine to me. And that consistency of really finding out who this person was, suddenly now I was like, oh, you're actually a pretty cool kid. I really kind
Yeah.
of like you. And so, like, day by day, that trust just started to build. And then I was able to go back out into the world and show, come out in my style and come out, and start a business and all of these things that honestly, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have had the courage to do.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me feel somewhat emotional, talking about that thick layer of shame that just can sit sit on us and make it so difficult to like crack through into the person that we actually are. And just I so relate to that. I want to talk more about this idea of self-compassion. And maybe you can talk about that with sharing a little bit about more about how your relationship with your body has changed,
Mhm.
being a veteran, being a a registered nurse, a parent, life coach, and then also that kind of weight gain that you experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about, your relationship to your body and how that's changed over time?
Ooh, that has been a challenge, I feel like my whole life. I was a dancer. I was a dancer when I was growing up, and I I just loved moving my body. But as I went through puberty, suddenly I became a very curvy girl. I mean, overnight, by the time my
Mm.
freshman year, I was a double D. And I had big hips and big thighs. I kind of have a, curvy but athletic, muscular body. And it didn't fit the mold of being a dancer. As a matter of fact, my junior year of high school, I was not they, I was not allowed to join the pom squad because they literally told me my body was distracting, like that my boobs were too bouncy, that it was too sexy.
It's
I
so
know it's
inappropriate.
like you think about that and I'm like, oh my
It's
God, I was
so inappropriate.
17.
Yeah.
Right. And that there's these messages that just kept telling me that my body was wrong. The very first night I was in boot camp, you brought up being a veteran. The very
Hmm.
first night I went to boot camp, they made me stand at attention for 45 minutes because they didn't know what to do with me because I had scored a perfect score on the ASVAB, which means I could basically do whatever job in the military I wanted, but I was 2 pounds under their weight limit. And they were
Okay.
like, the first words that were told to me is like, Skaggs, that was my maiden name was Skaggs. They're like, Skaggs, you are lazy. That's your problem.
Oh
So
gosh.
yeah, so there was this, and that
A
carried with
perfect
me.
score is lazy. Great.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
lazy. You're lazy because they looked at my body
Yeah.
and they said, they looked at my weight, they looked at my body, even though I was, oh my gosh, I was 146 pounds, by the way. Like, really?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
ridiculous here. But they said, that I didn't care about my body and that I was lazy. And that message was carried around for a decade. And
Yeah.
I internalized all of these messages that my body was wrong, that um, I was also hypersexualized in the military and, experienced a lot of things that I shouldn't have had to go through because of that. And, after I got out, suddenly I realized I had a lot of feelings about my body and they weren't good. They
Yeah.
weren't good. So then, I really did have to come face the music a little bit about that relationship with my body because it really was hurting me and I didn't realize it. So when I came to that point of compassion, suddenly I realized that relationship was so severely damaged. And I remember crying one day when I had this insight that my body was my soul's mate. I
Mm.
just had this beautiful concept that my soul came here to earth to express itself, to do its mission, to, whatever my soul came here to do, and that my body was here to support that.
Mm.
And so they literally are a team together. And I had been hating this other part of me. And like, I was almost crushing when I remember just bawling my eyes out when I realized that. And so I decided from that day on that I was going to get to know who this soul's mate was, who my soul's mate, who my body was.
Yeah.
And that changed everything. That was 4 years ago when that happened. And it just,
Well,
everything changed after that.
good for you. And I mean, I want to acknowledge too the the trauma that led to the shame around your body, right? Because it's not just that people were making these comments about your body. It was what these comments meant about who you are as a person, this idea of laziness based on your physical appearance, which is you know, so much driven by genetics to begin with.
Right.
Um, and then, but really, like, it wasn't just that they're commenting on your body. They're making it mean something about you, and that's how we get to this idea of shame, which is basically, I always want to clarify, shame and guilt are different. Shame is I am bad, and guilt is I did something bad. And
Hmm.
so really getting to see that difference, and self-compassion is when we can look at ourselves and say at the core, we are okay. We are good. We have good intentions. We do our best. And sometimes we will make actions that are not in alignment with our own values for so many reasons that happens. And be able to say, and I love myself anyway. And that could also be, I'm neutral about my body anyway. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't have to be that I love my body every day or every single way. I try to have more of a body neutrality perspective personally, but you can still have self-compassion even when you are still struggling with your body, and I would say that they're very related. So, um, yeah, I just really wanted to talk about that more. That idea
Yeah,
of shame and self-compassion is the only way through, really.
it really is. It's the there's this saying I like to say is that curiosity is the cure for judgment.
Yes.
Yeah, when we bring curiosity to any
Yeah.
situation, whether it's about our bodies or in relationships or anything, right? We
Yeah.
suddenly step into a vibration of like that's outside of judgment. You cannot be curious about something and judge it at
Right.
the
Yeah.
same time. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And so I think when it came to my body, like that's where the compassion was able to come in, is like I started to get curious about
Mm.
this thing, right? This part of me that has always been here, and curious about how I relate to that part of myself. And suddenly I wasn't criticizing myself as much. I stopped walking by the mirror and saying, "You're disgusting."
Right.
Right? Those things that we do. I mean, oh my gosh, we
Yeah.
all do. And it's,
Yeah.
it's very relatable. And I remember feeling how hard that was and how damaging that was now that I look back on it. But when I was in the thick of it, the curiosity is what allowed that compassion to come in, because suddenly it I looked at it through new eyes instead of saying, oh, my stomach is, fat and ugly. I actually got curious about why I had gained weight in my stomach. Turns out that my body was actually trying to save my life because I was insulin resistant and needed some
Oh, wow.
assistance. And so like when I started getting curious about what actually had happened to my body, suddenly I no longer felt that anger and resentment and carried that shame. I was able to
Right.
let some of that go because of that curiosity.
Yeah, and I'm curious what you think about this. we still, even when we bring ourselves that compassion and that curiosity, we can still struggle with negative self-talk. I mean, I certainly deal with this all the time. I've made huge strides towards being more positive about my body and feeling more comfortable and dressing the way that I want to, not just based on what I think I should be wearing. But there are moments where I still look in the mirror, I feel in my body, and I'm like, oh, I still struggle with that.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you relate to that at all and how you handle that, knowing that we're not always going to have positive thoughts about our body just because in general we're feeling better about it.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It's, I would be remiss to say that, oh yeah, every single day I'm like, oh my gosh, body, you're amazing. But what I do is I build things into my schedule that actually make me feel good about my body. And I do
Yeah,
that consistently. So, for example, one of the things I do is I set aside time every single day and have built my business around making sure that I take care of myself in the morning. And that means I'm getting, if I'm breaking my fast, uh, at that particular time, I have nutrition that supports my body in that way. So, supports
yeah,
my gut or supports my health. I'm making sure that I'm doing movement that brings me joy and that does not come from a place of abuse, right? Because I
right.
did that for a decade where I abused my body and was told to abuse my body. And that was horrible. Now, that's not the place that I come from. I come from a place of love and joy generation rather than I have to be thinner or change my body because I don't like the way it looks. It's more like I get to
Mm,
come back to a place of self-love in that space. And so by those consistent actions, suddenly now that negative self-talk, it becomes less and less because I'm intentionally building in things that makes me feel strong, that reminds me that I'm capable, reminds me that my body is capable. And when I do those things, suddenly the self-talk, it gets a lot smaller. The
yeah,
negative self-talk, I mean, yeah.
yeah, totally. And maybe this is a tricky question, but can you think of uh, how the experience of moving your body today feels different in comparison to when you were abusing your body?
Oh my gosh. So last year I had started doing a program on Beachbody called Fire and Flow. And I remember this moment where I had just finished a workout and Elise Joan, who's one of the trainers in this program, she I don't even remember what she said exactly, but there was this feeling I had that I was actually nourishing myself and that
Mm,
the movement that I was doing was loving me, not hating me. And this moment that I had, I'm sweating and I'm bawling.
yeah.
It overwhelmed me with emotion because suddenly I was like, realized I was doing something that was caring for me and not making me feel like a piece of crap, and I had been in that space and really had begun to resent movement. And
Right.
like I had a lot to unpack a lot of that because I resented moving my body because I was forced to do it for so long and told that my body was wrong and forced to make it smaller. And then suddenly I needed to get back into a space where I realized, oh, movement actually is more than that. It's about loving my mind and helping me relieve my anxiety and helping me feel stronger and more flexible and like all these things. And so now I was able to see that movement was not about shrinking myself.
Yeah.
Movement was actually about loving myself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh man, that's so powerful. I think, I don't know if you're very familiar with positive psychology, but
absolutely.
one of the, yeah, I just hear this overlap with moving towards good rather than trying to avoid bad, right? And when you're in that kind of abusive state, you're afraid of your body, you're afraid of being fat, you're afraid of getting fat, you're afraid of what people will say about you, you're afraid of what barriers your body might create or society will create around your body, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
positive psychology, moving towards positive is, you know, when I do yoga, I feel more relaxed. I
Mhm.
feel more able to go back to my work day through the rest of the day. I feel more able to show up for my family. I feel more strong. Um, it just seems like you're really encompassing those positive psychology practices.
Oh my gosh, I mean, like I'm sitting here, I'm like pointing on my nose. I was like, you hit the nail on the head in terms of my personal philosophy. This is what I teach, my clients in wellness or in, if they're trying to make moves in their career or improve their relationships. The thing is that the more that we focus on the negative pieces, then the more
Yeah,
the energy that we're feeding it. I mean, you had said something about that fear of being judged for our bodies or negative consequences for our bodies being the way it was. And I literally lived with that for a decade because I was always under threat of getting kicked out. Like if you
sure.
were not making weight, you were losing your job. And
That's
that
crazy.
was, I mean, the stress that came from that, which also raised my cortisol, which affected the
Yeah.
PCOS, which meant I
Oh
was
man.
not losing weight. Like those
Oh
things,
man.
and like I realized that mentality and how much I would love to go back to that Kori and say, sister, like here, come back to love and come back to, like you said, using that positive psychology mindset of, moving towards what you want instead of away from what you don't. Like when you
Hmm.
start focusing, I think, Tony Robbins says that, like what you know, where attention goes, energy flows, and that is so true because the more you focus on that care, that self-care, that I'm moving for care, I'm moving because it makes me joyful, because it connects me to myself, because it feels good. The more you focus on that, the easier it becomes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I suppose we should talk about clothing.
Oh yeah, maybe we should get to that point.
We talked a little bit at the beginning about making your outsides match your insides, and I would just love to hear kind of how do you decide what to buy or wear today? How do you decide
Ooh.
what not to buy or wear?
Yeah, I love that. I love these two questions. They're so amazing. So, how do I decide first what to buy or what to wear? I had this amazing exercise that I got inspired by one day. I don't even remember where it came from, but I asked myself in my journal, I said, how would I dress if I didn't think I was fat?
Yeah.
And then suddenly I was just like, I would wear my ties again, and I would put on lace and my leather pants and pencil, just like I would wear I just wrote out this whole thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's how I actually want to dress. And I realized that. And so I made a commitment to myself that day. And I said, okay, I'm not gonna buy anything else unless it fits inside this kind of style value. Like that's what I called it. Like it's like my values about my style. And
Mm.
unless it's very intentional, like, okay, I'm not going out in my corset to go feed the chickens, guys. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I am wearing a t-shirt that feels, good to me in terms of my color or expression. So even in that space, like my workout clothes or things like that, I'm very intentional about what I buy and does it fit within my personal style value? And on a daily basis, like what I choose, how I choose what I want to wear daily. Well, that's like a fun little game I like to do. I go into my closet and I ask myself, kind of ask my inner self or even my inner child and say, what would
Mm.
you like to wear today? And she's like, oh, pick this and pick this. And so I just do that. And, I have some freedom in that. I work from home and I, get to kind of play with my style a little bit. But even when I'm going for a speaking engagement or, out to a workshop, like I still play that game because that's how I bring the curiosity, the play, the part of me that wants to express herself and it gets me out of my head. And I'm able to fully show up as myself and in authenticity that way.
Yeah, I've done some inner child therapy, so I'm very familiar with that concept. But for anyone who's listening who, maybe isn't as familiar with inner child, how, well, besides what it is, maybe can you talk about how when you are getting dressed, how do you tap into that inner child?
Mhm.
I want to be really practical.
Yeah, really practical. Honestly, um, I would say that music helps me do that, honestly.
Ooh.
We were kind of talking about this before we started talking, but I have like curated playlists that I have on my phone that's very specific that gets me into a certain mood. So if I want to tap into my inner child, I'll listen to music that feels uplifting that I used to love as a kid.
Hmm.
Typically things like, I was a teenager during the boy band, so I'll put on some NSYNC and I will
Yeah.
dance around my room for a minute. So, getting tapping into this inner child part of you requires like a little bit of movement and
Mm.
kind of that shift. Nostalgia kind of helps a lot as well, gets you into that space and smiling. Just even doing that can help you connect with a little
Mm.
bit more playfulness and a little bit more authenticity. And so I literally do that before I go into my closet. I find a way to tap in, and it's almost, I had to think about it for a minute because it's almost just like automatic
Yeah.
now because I get into that state. But when I do, I feel so much better because there's also times where I'm not wanting to be super vibrant. And that changes, throughout
Mm.
my cycle, wherever I'm at in my cycle. Sometimes I want to dress up like a villain, right? Which is also kind of fun, like sometimes I want to dress up like a bad guy. And I'm like, how would I dress if I was a bad guy today?
Oh
And then
my
I put on my
gosh.
my jean jacket and like my spiky earrings and things like that. So it's really just kind of tuning in, like, how am I feeling today? Who do I want to express myself today? And
Mm.
that getting into that vibe is, that's kind of a part of that self-trust of like getting to know who you are and knowing who you are throughout your cycle or throughout your kind of emotional patterns. And it's a lot of fun when you do that.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about dressing as my inner child, and someone on Substack, Lindsay Sword, had
Okay.
posted this thing about styling sweater vests. And when I was in like elementary school, I had multiple sweater vests from the Gap that I wore on like repeat,
Oh
and
yeah, I
I
love that.
I just got a new sweater vest and I'm just like absolutely like obsessed with it. I'm just curious, are there any things that you wore as a kid that you are literally like kind of thinking about today, or even colors, or what did little Corey wear?
Oh my gosh. So I have a picture of me sitting over here on one of my where I'm like sitting on a merry-go-round, and I'm wearing this bright teal sweater with like all kinds of stuff on it. And teal's like one of my favorite colors. So I remember just loving wearing bright things.
Mm,
And we grew up shopping secondhand, and so I remember always going to the Goodwill and finding the most colorful things that I could. And so I think as I've gotten older, been able to play with color and find the ways that I want to express myself. Has been really fun to see, this kind of idea of what I thought was cool or what I thought I was fun, especially growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, like there was color everywhere. So,
yeah.
and then having the tease bangs. I mean, geez, I've already got, I'm teasing my bangs. So like, I mean, because my bangs literally stood straight up as a kid. They call me porcupine because my, my bangs literally stood straight up. And I'm like, oh, look, well, I guess this works now because my hair naturally wants to do this swoosh.
Nice.
So, yeah, like really bringing those kinds of things in and just not taking myself so seriously. Yeah. And I love
Yeah.
this like idea of what you said with the sweater vest. I'm like, ooh, like I have to think about that because I love that idea. That is so great. Bringing that in. And it sounds like it
Yeah.
makes you happy too.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just, whatever reason, when I was a kid, I just thought they were the absolute coolest thing, and no one was wearing them. No one.
Right.
It was just me. So that's how I know it's authentic.
There you go. Exactly. And you get to do that. And the thing is like people might look at you like funny. Like I know when I show up in my bright ass pink, jacket and pants and all these things, like sometimes people are like, whoa, okay. But it I realized too when I stopped dressing for other people's approval and started
Mm,
dressing for my own approval, God, I just got so much freer, so much
mm,
happier.
mm.
It really makes a difference.
I love that. Um, let's talk a little bit about body awareness. We've talked about how you bring yourself into that kind of childlike wonder space when you're getting dressed, but when you are picking out uh, what to wear, do you pay attention to texture, fit, or style that feel physically comfortable on your body? Or on the other side of that, do you ever wear something that's intentionally uncomfortable because it puts you into a certain headspace? I'm curious about that too.
I love this because I realized being a professional speaker and a person who's out in the kind of out there on stages and doing things, I had started looking at different women and what they were doing kind of in my industry. And I realized a lot of them wear heels. And when I first started speaking, I had this like choice point where I realized I was like, well, I get to choose how I want to show up. And I realized I jump around on stage. I move around an awful lot. And I was like, I do not want to do that in heels. And so I made a choice. I was like, I'm not going to speak in heels. I'm going to speak
Yeah,
in my chucks because that's what I love to wear. And they're comfortable. And that gives me the freedom to move around and to not like worry about my feet because I don't want to be worrying about my feet when I've been standing on stage for an hour and a half. Like I want to be serving the people that I came there. I want to be, in flow. I don't want to be worrying about my feet. So, yeah, I made a choice like right then and there. I was like, I'm not going to wear heels to speak, even though heels, I mean, aesthetically,
mm,
sure. I mean, they make you taller. I'm kind of short. I'm a shorty girl. I'm about 5'4". So, would it make my legs look longer and kind of things? Sure. But nah, bro. I'm like, I
yeah.
don't and so, I'm sure there's other things too, but I feel like that particular point is like you making the choice about how you want to show up and realizing that actually comfort in that regards actually does matter because it is distracting if you're not feeling comfortable if the textures of the clothes you're wearing or things are too tight or just, for the sake of again, kind of like this external approval. And if you do make that choice to wear something, then be intentional with it. Don't just be like, oh, I'm going to wear these heels because they expect me to. It's like, oh, I'm going to wear these heels because I feel like today I want to be in that space. Maybe I want to feel extra sexy, or maybe there's something, particularly I want, like you said, a feeling I want to come into. But you best believe I'm going to have a pair of sneakers in my bag
I love
in that
that.
case. Yeah.
I love that clarity. And, I asked that question about purposefully wearing something uncomfortable, right? Because, for example, the comedian Nikki Glazer, I don't necessarily agree with everything that she says or does, but I've been watching a lot of her interviews and she talks about how she wears these like sky high heels to perform in. And she's in such a flow state with her comedy anyway that when she's on stage, she like puts them on and then it's like, okay, it's go time. And
Mhm.
then she's totally fine wearing them for the whole performance. And only when she's done with the performance do her feet hurt and she wants to take them off. But I just thought that was like so fascinating. It's almost like this, yeah, to what you were saying, like changing from like normal Nikki to stage Nikki or whatever, and I think
Mhm.
that's really interesting. But going back to your performance, like you want to be yourself all the time, maybe, and just really kind of have just
Yeah.
let your shoes not be the focus.
Yeah, I feel like it's, and I can definitely see what she's kind of saying in that space of like stepping into that person that's on stage, and it's almost like kind of turning up the volume a little bit because that does
Mhm.
help you get into flow. And I know that there's kind of certain variations of things, days when I'll maybe not turn my volume all the way up when I'm choosing my clothes or things like that,
Right.
wanting to be a little bit more casual. But I do know that there is that, like, I have this hot pink blazer that I wear. And every time I put that thing on, man, I just feel like $1 million. And so I kind of I reserve that jacket for when I need that space because it does help me get into that space. Now, granted, it's fitted for me and it feels good and everything like that too. But there is definitely something to be said about that, about having something that helps you click into flow and like
Mhm.
a trigger, so to speak. And so I feel like clothes can do that. Certainly, they can be something that can amplify you if you need some confidence to go in and talk to your boss about a raise, or if you need to have a conversation with somebody that might be difficult. Then yeah, find the thing in your closet that makes you feel great and put that on because it does help a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I like making space for the multiplicity of
Yes.
human experience. Like, we don't have to elevate comfort exclusively. There are other ways, but personally, I love being comfortable. So,
Yeah.
I always try to balance my own kind of preferences. So, we're recording this towards the start of 2025. I guess we're we're 2 months in now, but it feels like it's still just beginning. Do you
Hmm.
have any style or personal goals you're excited to work towards this year?
Well, I feel like I've really got a good handle on my wardrobe and where it's going, but I need to start. This is like I wrote this down. I love this question because I need to get my stuff tailored. Like I realized, and I remember that in my image back when I was an image consultant, like I would tell my clients that all the time: get your stuff tailored because clothes right off the rack are not meant for your body.
Yeah,
And now that I have this completely like expanded view of what my body is. Now I'm like even more so like I need to step back into a space of like making things fit me instead of expecting that my body fits everything else. And I feel like that is just such the narrative of my life. Like there was always this expectation that my body fit every external viewpoint, regulation, standard of image or whatever. And I'm at this point now where I'm like, nah, I'm going to make my clothes fit my body. And, I'm kind of going through some changes in my health. And, I've been on weight loss journey and getting myself back to health and reclaiming myself after the challenges I went through. And so tailoring is absolutely becoming more and more necessary as my body is kind of changing in that way. So I have made that commitment, thanks to you asking that question. I'm like, what's my goal this year? Yeah, get my stuff tailored so that way I feel I'm getting the most out of my wardrobe and it really truly does fit me and my body.
good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe I should do that too. Um,
It makes a difference. It really does. I tell people that like it makes a difference, especially with things like that are a little bit more structured, blazers and jackets, or even a pair of jeans. Like getting a pair of
yeah,
jeans tailored. Wow, you can take a pair of jeans from Target and elevate those to make them look like they're from Von Mar, okay, or or Nordstrom. Like you really can with a bit of tailoring, and it's definitely not, in terms of an investment, a cost investment. It's pennies on the
yeah,
dollar to those kind of other things. So,
yeah, totally. I, before we wrap up, I really wanted to go back to this idea of, you said it so well. It was like dressing for other people's approval versus your approval. And I was just really hoping you could expand on that a little bit because I think that's the core of what intuitive style is. And it's not, to me, not necessarily negating the fact that we're social people and we care about other people's opinions, but this notion of approval and how
Hmm.
we decide what we approve or not approve. Can you share a little
Hmm.
bit more about that concept?
Yeah, I love this idea of what you're encapsulating here with the approval aspect. Like, whose approval? Whose approval are we seeking? Is it other people or is it ours? And understanding that, I feel like the bridge there is really about intention. I like to think about the intentional energy I'm bringing to the space, right? When I dress to go out on a date with my partner, like I want to feel sexy. And yeah, I want, there's an extra action there. So there is thought here that I bring. Like, what does, he find attractive? He really likes my butt. So I like to wear, I have these pair of like Spanx like leather pleather leggings that I wear, and I love wearing them and he loves them. And so there's
Yeah.
this part of me that's bringing this intentional energy that we're creating together during an
Mhm.
experience through my wardrobe. And that, am I dressing for his approval? Well, in a sense, maybe, but it's different. It's not like I'm only thinking about him. It's I'm thinking about him and me and who I want to be in this space. And I do that for everything. If I'm doing a speaking engagement, if I have an interview with somebody, if I'm meeting friend for coffee. Like I really spend a lot of time thinking about who do I want to be in this space. And when I do that, I find that I show up way more as an authentic person and not just dressing because I think that they're going to approve of me. It is considering them, right? Different places. I'm probably going to dress differently with my friend than I will with my partner. Like that naturally makes sense. But when I am more intentional about that and choose outfits that reflect who I want to be that day, then I find that that external approval just like dissipates. It goes away and
Yeah.
it really becomes a kind of a collaborative or a community, kind of like you said, we're social creatures. So there is something that's kind of being formed together, but it's, it's definitely I'm bringing myself back into that conversation instead of just it just being about other people.
I love that. And such great examples. Thank you for sharing. Uh,
Absolutely.
Kori, this has been incredible. I've learned so much and just I love your question about, what would I wear if I didn't think I was fat? I love the suggestion of listening to nostalgic music when I get dressed or when I play in my closet. Definitely haven't done that in a while. What other advice would you give to someone who's trying to build a wardrobe that feels intuitive to them?
Mm, just really get to know who you are now. We are dynamic creatures and we are always evolving. And I think sometimes we go through so much in our lives, if we become moms or maybe we have a weight change or we go through these things and sometimes we'll look back at pictures and be like, gosh, I wish I was her again. Gosh, I wish I was back at that weight again. Gosh, I wish I was like, right? We look backwards. And I think the more that we come back to this space now and really get to know who we are now and then start expressing ourselves from that point forward, now we feel aligned. Now we feel more genuine
Yeah.
in this representation and no longer are we feeling resentful or even that shame of that change. Now we are really stepping into who this person is right here right now and then who she can come through and step out into the world without that, like we said, that external approval. So yeah, just get to know who you are, and that you'll find that when you start matching your matching your outsides with your insides, suddenly you feel just much more you every day.
I love that. That's incredible, and I so relate to that idea. I used to, yeah, like look longingly at pictures of myself when I was thinner, and I was like, oh, if I just looked like that again. But I've put in so much work to like be at peace with who I am and how I want to dress that when I look back on those pictures now, I don't feel that anymore. I just feel like, oh, she had no idea how like wrapped up in her body she was and how obsessed with being thin she was. And now when I look at those pictures, I don't want to go back there. I don't envy her. I just feel like, oh wow, she needed some love, and you couldn't necessarily see that based on like what we think when we look at a thin person, but I
Mhm.
see it. And yeah, I think that's such an incredible truth that you brought up there, which is just, when you're actually living authentically, the size or your weight is just really, or whatever you're going through, really becomes secondary.
It does. I love that. And I resonate with that so much. There were pictures I looked at, before I went through all of my challenges, in the last decade. And yeah, I remember looking at myself when I was 120 pounds and thinking, gosh, she was so awesome. She was so, beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And, but, similarly, just like you came back to a space and said, actually, I don't want to go back to that person because I now know how incredibly strong I am. I now
Mm,
know how incredibly resilient I am through all the things that I went through. And you know what? My body was helping me the whole time take care of me when I was really struggling to take care of myself. And for that, I am so grateful. And now I get to bring that wisdom and share my story and help others also feel like, hey, it's okay that we aren't, that size that we used to be. And it's okay to focus on our health and our wellness and, come back to that space. But the more that we realize that, hey, I can be vibrant now, I can feel like myself now, and I don't have to, criticize that part of me, then the more that I feel like that compassion comes in and we really truly feel more alive.
I mean, incredible.
Yeah.
Just this has been so much fun and just so eye-opening, and I really hope that everybody gets to listen to this and hear you speak about this topic. And so speaking of which, where can listeners find you? How do they catch up with what Corey's up to?
Oh my gosh, I love this. So you can catch me on Instagram at Kori Rae Wellness or find me on Facebook. I have an amazing group on Facebook called Lead Like a Woman. And it is a place where we are ditching the hustle and we're really stepping into this space of confidence and leading with our heart and living vibrant lives through prioritization of self care and building community and collaboration. Because I really feel like the more that women are lit up from within, the more that we can change the world. So you can find Lead Like a Woman on Facebook, and I would be just truly honored for any of you that would like to join to get inside a sisterhood of space where we're talking about taking care of ourselves, from a loving standpoint, and then taking our missions and our purposes out into the world so we can truly make the changes that we desire to see in the world. And it starts with us.
Incredible. And for anyone who is maybe not identifying as a woman at this point in time, is that a safe space for them as well?
Absolutely. I feel like, I mean, we didn't really talk a whole lot about that particular subject, but there is, I use a lot of divine feminine type of energy. And whether you identify as a woman or non binary, or whatever your identification is, I'm also a member of the LGBTQ community, and I understand that there's a lot of challenge in those spaces. But I always create a space um, of safety and how people want to express themselves. It really is about, we talk a lot about cycles and we talk about living through kind of this cyclical rhythm of self. And so there's certainly opportunity here. And I use this term woman as a kind of a reclamation of self. And so I get it. It might not be for everybody, but absolutely inside that space is a very, I'm very, very conscious about creating safe space and for people to use the pronouns and have people use the pronouns that are appropriate for them and them to express themselves. But it really is truly about coming back to our personal values of who we are and leaning into you know feminine leadership rather than patriarchal type leadership there.
Incredible. I just wanted to make sure that the right
No,
people were
absolutely.
were getting the message. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was a great question. Thank you.
thank you so much. Well, I will let you get back to the rest of your day.
Oh, thank you so much, Maureen. It's been truly a pleasure to be able to talk with you and an honor to be here
Likewise.
for your community.
Likewise. All right.